I'm often amused by people who think that because they went to elementary school, they're prepared to tell teachers how to do their jobs. The confidence of what seemed to work for us as individuals fuels a lot of stress for teachers. I think the same is true of parenting. Nothing saps the confidence of the uninitiated quite like the reality of actually becoming a parent. Today's guest, however, tells parents to cut themselves some slack. She's KJ Dell Antonia this week on Story in the Public Square. Hello and welcome to Story in the Public Square, where storytelling meets public affairs. I'm Jim Ludis from the Pell Center at Salve Regina University. Alongside me is my friend and co-host, G. Wayne Miller of the Providence Journal. Each week we talk about big issues with great guests, authors, journalists, artists, and more, to make sense of the stories that shape public life in the United States today. To help us this week, we're joined by KJ Dell Antonia, former New York Times reporter, editor, and blogger, who is the author of How to Be a Happier Parent: Raising a Family, Having a Life, and Loving Almost Every Minute. KJ, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me. It was great.
So we want to talk about your book, but one of the things that always strikes me is that we're all experts in childhood because we were children once.
Yes,
right?
And we're experts in parenting because we probably had them.
And teaching because we went to school. It's like this is like a universal constant, right?
Yeah.
So, but my question for you though is, you write about childhood. How did your own childhood sort of inform your experience as a writer now? That's
a great question. My childhood was pretty different than the parenthood that I offer my kids. I was an only child with two doting parents, but who did not in any way, shape, or form wrap their lives around me. I spent a lot of my childhood wandering around behind the net at indoor tennis facilities, picking up balls because, they didn't bother to find me something fun to do while they did their things. And in some ways, that's a lesson that I pulled from when I wrote How to Be a Happier Parent, because I totally looked at my own parents and was like, wait a minute, they did not need this book. They were doing just fine.
That's something. So your path to becoming a writer, you went to Kansas State University. And then some time at the New York Times. But talk to us about sort of where you got the writing bug and how you discovered that you had this voice within you.
Well, I was a lawyer in between those things, but I've always been a writer. I'm sure many of your guests say the same. But I wrote what you would have called fan fiction if I were younger. It didn't exist when I was, let's just say MASH and Battlestar Galactica fan fiction were not things that you are not, as far as I know, things you find on the internet. So I had a pretty embarrassingly nerdy, writery childhood. Went to college, thought about studying actual journalism, was daunted by the need to stick to the facts. And then I became a lawyer. The story's going straight downhill.
And you were a prosecutor for New York, in the city of New York, too.
I was. I represented the people of the state of New York, and it was a great job, but it didn't turn out to be a lifer.
But it informed some of your later writing, and we'll get into that in a minute, but lessons that you learned there.
Absolutely.
So then you went to Slate, or you wrote for Slate?
Yes. We moved out of New York a year after 9/11, sort of picked up life and went to New Hampshire, and actually unrelated. And I was determined to start a freelance career. This was when you still put articles in envelopes and put stamps on them and mailed them to places.
I remember those days.
Exactly. And
got your rejections back.
And got your rejections back.
I know that story well, believe me.
Yeah, but I think probably because of having the legal background, took it very professionally and, looked at what the magazines wanted and tailored what I was offering them to what they already had in there, spelled the editors' names right, got the word counts right, and I was pretty successful pretty quickly. Internet ramps up. Yeah, I joined Slate fairly early on and kind of took it from there. I went to the Times from Slate.
And you wrote the Motherlode blog. What was that?
The Motherlode Blog.
I remember it well, but some of our audience may not.
Yeah, the Motherlode Blog was the Times' parenting section. It started out as a blog, and then it morphed into sort of hosting content from parenting blogs, which were a huge thing. That would have been 2008, 2000. Now that's too early, but about 2010, 2011. I took it over in 2013, and then we started inviting in other voices to write essays directly for us. We started to cover as much policy as personal stuff, and really brought it from being about like the intimate stories of parenting to being about both the intimate stories and the sort of external societal factors that were affecting those stories.
So obviously you get into issues of the family, but I think early on with that blog, you realized, you already knew, but you made it very clear that the family had changed. I mean, sort of this Norman Rockwell image that some people had and may still have of what the family was or is, of course, isn't really true at all. So was there one event that made you make that shift to recognizing that there are foster families, that there are families with adopted children, including your own,
mine,
including your own, that there are families with LBGT parents?
From the minute I took, well, first of all, one of my missions after taking on, it took a long time to accomplish, was to change the name. Motherlode was really a funny name when it was named, and I love the people that named it.
Kind of
and
a
it was
pun,
meant,
of
it
course.
was meant to be a pun. It was the Motherlode of parenting information. But we were really at a moment when fathers' voices needed to be heard, and we needed to be very, very, very emphatic in our explanation that we're not, this is not a gendered thing, parenting. This is something that, we all do. So that was part of the mission for me from day one. And it's now, it became Well Family and still exists as Well Family. And now the Times has a section just simply called Parenting. Pretty nice.
Direct, straight.
You can guess what that is named after. But what I was going to say is, I had people talking to me constantly. My email box was always full. I had pitches for essays, and those pitches and the essays that I was reading were so broad, were so all over the map. They were from parents of kids who were identifying in different gendered ways. They were from LGBTQ parents. They were certainly from dads. They were from moms who were having different experiences. And then there was a point when I really looked at it all and went, oh wait, what we're missing here is the kind of people who aren't going to send me an essay. So then we started a column we called, or a section that we called How I Do It. And I reached out to parents who probably weren't going to send me an essay and asked them to tell me their stories. So
These might have been parents living in the margins.
Yeah,
exactly.
so I had
and not necessarily even readers of the Times.
Right. I had a great essay about the struggle to find public housing. Another one from a mother who was dealing with getting her child back out of the foster care system. Things like that. And so helping to find and tell those stories was huge.
Took her first steps in a homeless shelter.
Yes, actually, she ended up writing her own book about that.
Really?
Yeah, Made. You might have heard of it. Stephanie. Oh, it was huge last year. Yeah, last year it was one of the best books of last year.
So that was a sort of an amazing research opportunity, getting all these emails from people and interviewing all these people. I mean, I'm thinking scholars might have killed.
Parents.
Yeah, scholars would kill for that opportunity. So it gave you, clearly a very informed view and ability to write your blog and your book, which we're going to get into momentarily.
I'm curious, outside of your work, does popular culture depict parenthood accurately? I mean, what are the stories that we're telling ourselves, and are they valid?
They're certainly told by a limited number of people, right? I mean, I'm the standard. I am the standard expression of modern parenthood. I am a white upper middle class woman, and you see me talking about parenthood a lot. You don't see the male version of me as often. You don't see the person of color version of me as often. You don't see the younger version of, the person who had her kids maybe before college. You don't see that version as often. And you don't hear those stories as much. So I think we're still missing an opportunity to hear more stories about what parenting is like. But on the other hand, I think we've lost, we don't tell the rose-colored glasses story as much as we used to. We're all pretty aware that being a parent is a challenge, especially in a society where there's not a lot of policy support, shall we say, for parents who might like to do something like have a job at the same time, because some kids like to eat.
Some kids.
Some. And a few of them also need housing. Yeah, the challenge to be both the caregiver and the breadwinner is a hard one. And I think we recognize that much more readily now than we used to.
So your book has a number of suppositions. One of them is from your own experience. When you became a parent, you soon enough realized that you were going to commit 20 plus years of your life to parenting, as you write, which is a long time, needless to say. Do you think most parents, when they have their first child or expecting their first child, planning their first child, have any clue really that you're looking at such a commitment of time?
If we did, I don't know that we would sign up.
So in other words, none of us would be here.
I totally remember at some point with toddlers hearing someone tell a story about their teenager and thinking, well, yeah, you shouldn't have had teenagers. Oh, wait. Hold on. Teenagers are a lot of trouble, baby. It's not optional, actually. They're gonna turn into that. I don't think we can possibly know what we're getting into. Same is true of growing your family by adoption or growing your family by taking foster kids into it. You think it's going to be one thing, and it never is, no matter what it was that you thought it was going to be.
Another conclusion or supposition is that the amount of stress involved in being a parent, that's again something that I don't think people going into it for the first time realize. And that comes not simply from your own experience, but from research. Talk a little bit about the research that backs that up, stress of modern parenting.
Right. Well,
with jobs, I mean, you talked, not me.
Yeah. We already talked about the many people that I interviewed in the course of working with the Times, but I also did some research. I worked with a professor at Fordham University. We pulled together 1,000 representative parents of kids from, I think we went 3 to 15, tried to make them reflect the population, and just asked questions about what in their parenting experience did make them happy and what didn't. And we definitely got a lot, we got results that reflected a lot of stress out there. And it's the stress of having kids in a time when the ladder is no longer quite so clear. I mean, a lot of us, climbed a really obvious ladder of college, graduate school, career, whatever. That's not a clear path to success anymore. And it's also the stress of raising kids in a society that tends to kind of assume there's a parent at home and a parent in the workplace, when for the majority of us at this point, there's not. Both parents are in the workplace, and actually in a lot of families right now, there's only one parent, and that parent had better be in the workplace. So there's a lot of different stressors playing into being a parent right now. We like to tell a funny story about how, oh, well, you're so stressed because you're helicoptering, but that's not really at the root of the challenges. There's a lot going on that is actually really, makes having a family right now difficult.
So KJ, I think as a parent myself, the question that I have for you is, what is the secret to being a happy parent?
I think the secret to being a happier parent is not to always put your kids first. I think that my research, everything. I don't just think this. Kids who believe that they come first are actually pretty stressed out kids. I want you to imagine feeling as a child that your parents' happiness depended on you, that your family's schedule depended on you, that everything, in fact, revolved around you. It sounds pretty good, but it actually, it's giving kids an improperly sort of inflated view of who they have to be in the world, when really their job ought to be just to be exploring, being kids, be playing around, not maybe be making some top team or hitting the violin really hard, or any of the variety of other things that we sometimes do put on our kids. And then as parents, it's important for us to take a step back and sort of embrace our adult lives even after we have kids. A lot of people, once they have kids, so there's that year-long period after you first have a baby, especially that first one, you really almost can't do anything. I mean,
Right.
Everything you do is accompanied in some way, shape, or form by this little screaming bundle. And if it's not with you, you have to know where it is at all times. There is no just sort of dropping it off at the... That's really, and I think that adjustment kind of messes with our heads. And then as the kids get older and we're able to gradually pull back in all of the people that we used to be and all of the things that we used to do and all of the activities that we used to love, sometimes instead of going in that direction, we kind of go in the more kid stuff direction, and the kids become more of a focus than is healthy for either us or for them.
So this, the sacrilege notwithstanding, this seems to make eminent sense. But I think it's hard.
It is
for
hard.
Parents to do that, and particularly
it feels very risky.
Well, that's it. That you're somehow neglecting your child if
Right.
you are not hovering.
Yeah,
right?
no. What if I had only taken my child to the chess club when they were 3, they could now be the chess champion and being admitted to all these fantastic universities and heading off into a glorious career in public service, and I destroyed all that by deciding to play tennis instead with a limited budget that we had when the child was 3. Let me just take that. I can take it down a math route.
It's funny because it's real, right? It's funny because it's true. Are there strategies? Are there practical things that parents can do to help them adopt that kind of mindset?
I think thinking about our own life paths is I already said it's not useful in terms of, you're going to graduate from school and you're going to get a job, and most of us, but the important thing is, I don't know you guys' history, but most of the adults that I know, while they followed that path up to a point, then promptly sort of dropped off it, as I did. I did go to law school. I didn't end up as a lawyer. Many of the adults around us are in their second or third or fourth career, or they have a passion project, or they have, they're fed by other things. They're not doing the thing that their parents enrolled them in at age 3, or even at age 5. And another sort of just mindset strategy for thinking about it is a lot of this stuff that's available to our kids. First of all, a lot of it sounds super fun. I mean, I would love to have, can I go to cartooning classes and then afterwards, could I maybe go do taekwondo and you guys could sit in the background and clap? Because that would be awesome, right? And then you could drive me somewhere, probably stop, get some food.
Where does the pressure to make the perfect child, and I'm sort of making that up, but not really, where does the pressure come to do that, to spend all of your time when parents need their own time?
Oh, that's...
My wife who is in this field, her clients, it's advice she gives her clients all the time: parents, you need your own time. Where does the pressure come from to be there always with your kids, to make them take the taekwondo, to be there at the soccer game, to blah, 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 blah.
Not to make your child perfect, but to be the perfect parent.
Right, and if you don't do that, if God forbid on a Saturday morning you say, well, I'm not going to the soccer game, I'm going to have coffee and read the paper, you feel guilty. Where does that come from, these pressures?
So I think it's a bunch of things. And one of the things is the change in what we can expect for our kids versus what our parents could expect for us. And that's the external thing. We look at our kids and we look at their future and we're not sure what it looks like. Whereas I think that a lot of our parents looked at us looked at our future and they expected it to kind of look like theirs. Now, it didn't necessarily, but that was their expectation. Whereas we can see the world is dramatically changing. It's terrifying. It's really hard to know whether or not you're preparing your kid for it. That's one piece of it. But there's another piece of it. First of all, when it comes to all those activities, soccer, taekwondo, Suzuki violin, et cetera, follow the money. People figured out that there were parents that would pay for extra, extra batting cage time, extra hockey training time, extra violin lessons, and it's not just a cottage industry. As youth sports is a $9 billion a year industry, and that figure's, I think, 7 years old. It's an industry. There's a parenting industrial complex that is sort of designed to scoop us up and feed us into stuff. And then there's that sort of question of, spending the Saturday morning at home while your kid is playing soccer, which I so absolutely encourage happier parents to do. It's hard when the people around you aren't doing it.
Well, there's the peer pressure piece of
Yeah.
it. There's no question about that. We could talk about all of your chapters in your book, and we're not going to have time to do that. But I want to start with one. Screens are fun, limiting them is not, which is the amount of time that adults, obviously parents, but children of all ages spend in front of a screen. And you had one statistic where 9 hours a day teenagers spend in I think it was 9 hours a day, in non-school related screen time. And screen time, of course, is the tablet or the
Right.
TV.
That might have
or
been the parents, too.
The cell phone. Is that good or bad, or talk about that? That's a lot of time, and that
that is
certainly
a
is
lot of
different
time.
from when we were growing up, when there were not so many screens.
It's absolutely different, and that is also frightening. It's frightening to us as parents. It's frightening to us as a society. We've changed the way that we communicate, and there's nothing more fundamental to humanity than the way that we talk to each other. And every time we change that, whether we change it by adding the written word, whether we change it by adding telephones, whether we change it by adding TV and radio, every time we change it, we freak out. So we're in the process of freaking out. I can't endorse 9 hours a day of non-homework screen time, so I am not doing that. But as a whole, when I look at the kids, first I just want to step back. When I look at screen time and kids, it kind of comes in two flavors. There's the screen time for kids for whose screens you control as a parent. That's basically 0 to 7. If your 7-year-old's in control of their own screen time, you need to pull that back. It's time to fix that.
Yeah.
It's time to get that back. But there comes a point when they can work the remote, or they have an iPad they consider their own, or whatever. And I would say that probably ought to be more like 10 or 11, but that's such a moving target. Once they've got control of their own screen time, your job changes. Your job is not to put limits on them. Your job is not to control them. Your job is to teach them to control themselves. Yeah. It's a problem of their generation. It's something that they are going to have to figure out. It's something that we as parents can't say, this is the right way to do this, because among other things, that statistic about the number of hours people were spending on their screens outside of work, it's even worse for adults. We don't know how to we don't know how to moderate our own screen time. So this is it's an ongoing conversation.
Well, do
it's
kids figure it out themselves?
I think they start
You're
to.
giving them, a fair amount of authority here, and in your experience has been that they do figure it out, and that they are aware that there are potential dangers.
This is a national conversation. Our kids are having it amongst themselves, our teenagers especially. They're having it with their teachers. They're having it with their pediatricians and their counselors. They're having it with their colleges. They're having it in their philosophy class.
Which is all good.
It's all good. Yeah, it's something that we're all going to have to sort out, but I do think they're on it.
We've got just a couple of minutes left here, and I wanted to make sure that we talk for a second about #MWriting, which is your podcast.
Yes.
So tell us about it.
#MWriting is our podcast about, I say this every week in the introduction, it's about writing all the things. We talk about writing fiction, we talk about nonfiction, we talk about pitches and proposals. Really, it's a podcast about the business of writing and the challenges of sitting down and getting the work done. I share the co-hosting chair with Jessica Leahy, who's a well-known author of nonfiction, including the book The Gift of Failure, and with Serena Bowen, who is the USA Today best-selling indie author of over 30 romances. So we have sort of three very different perspectives on writing, and we have guests, and we sit down every week, and we just sort of figure out, all right, what are we doing, how are we doing it, and what should we be doing next?
It sounds great. I'm definitely gonna check it out. We also need you to mention, or we can mention, you have a novel coming out.
I do.
Talk about that very briefly.
Moving into career number 6 or something like that.
None of which your parents predicted.
Yeah. This is my first novel. It is a family story. It's called The Chicken Sisters. It's a fun beach read about 2 fried chicken shacks in a small town in Kansas, run by 2 feuding families, 3 generations, and the reality TV show that bursts in to save/destroy them all.
So, why do you write?
Why do I write? I write to tell stories. I write to tell, because I've always just wanted to tell. I tell true stories and I help other people tell theirs. And I personally believe that fiction is a way to tell true stories.
If a day goes by that you don't write, do you start to get a craving?
A little bit, yeah.
I
tend to write. I'm always writing my head. It was James Thurber, whose wife would look at him at a party and go, "Thurber, stop writing."
It's a two-edged sword, that writing in your head. Believe me, I know it well.
Well, we're glad you do, and we're glad you took some time to spend it with us. Thank you so much. The book is How to Be a Happier Parent. It's worth a read. That's all the time we have this week, but if you want to know more about Story in the Public Square, you can find us on Facebook and Twitter, or visit pellcenter.org, where you can always catch up on previous episodes. For G. Wayne Miller, I'm Jim Ludes, asking you to join us again next time for more Story in the Public Square.